My name is Gregory Thomas, but I still go by Greg. I'm 68 years old, and I live right here in Savannah, Georgia, not far from the coast. I'm a retired chief engineer with the Port Authority, but I still work part-time in the shipyard's logistics office from 2 in the afternoon until 6 o'clock in the evening. Man, oh man. This story I'm about to tell you completely changed my life, and maybe it will change yours too. Because you never really know who's standing right beside you, even after an entire lifetime. I was born in Savannah in 1957. I grew up feeling the sticky heat of the coastal summer and eating the best low-country boil in the region. My childhood was simple, but we never wanted for anything. My father worked for the Atlantic Shipping Company, and ever since I was a little boy, I dreamed of serving my country, wearing a uniform, doing something important. And that's what I did. I joined the Port Authority's engineering division when I was 18 in 1975, and I dedicated my life to protecting the sea lanes. In 1985, when I was 28, I met Sarah at a community oyster roast. I fell head over heels for her beauty, her gentle way, her smile. We got married the following year and built a life together. We never got rich, that's for sure. A Port Authority salary doesn't perform miracles, but we always lived with dignity. We built our little house up piece by piece. We had 2 children who are grown now and living far away. We were together for 33 years. 33 years, folks. Almost 4 decades, sharing the same bed, the same table, the same dreams, or at least that's what I thought. About a year back, I started noticing strange signs. Little things, you know. Details that a man who spent his life in harbor security learns not to ignore. A different perfume on the sofa. Expensive bourbon glasses in the sink when I came home. When Sarah knew I couldn't drink because of my blood pressure medication. Sarah was always tired when I got back from work. A neighbor asked me about the silver Lexus that was always parked outside my house. And the bed sheets were always washed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you're enjoying my story, please leave a like to cheer up this old heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next life stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is right now. It makes me really happy to know which corner of America or maybe the world is listening to me and what time of day it is for you. My childhood in Savannah was like any kid's life in the South during the 60s. I was born in 1957 and grew up running through the tidal flats, swimming in the river, picking blueberries right off the vine in the backyard, and playing chess with the neighbors. My father, Robert Thomas, was a dock foreman for Atlantic Shipping. He worked at the main pier that connected Savannah to New York and Europe. On weekends, he'd take me to see the cargo ships arrive, those powerful vessels bringing goods from all over. My mother, Maria, made the best shrimp and grits in our neighborhood, Midtown, and sold it at the seafood market on Saturdays. I grew up hearing stories of the civil rights movement, of Dr. King, and the battles for voting rights that happened right here in Georgia. My grandfather had served in the Korean War and taught me to navigate a small skiff when I was only 7 years old in 1964. We'd go out early, while the fog was still covering the marshlands, and only come back when the sun started setting behind the port cranes. I wasn't the most studious kid in school, but I tried hard. I remember in 1967, when I was 10, our teacher took us to see the city's first high-tech container crane installed at the port. We were all stunned by that massive machine loading goods onto the ships. It was a huge event for a coastal city back then. Life was simple, but it had its charms. The smell of the pecan pie my mother baked on winter mornings. The sweet tea shared in a circle with the neighbors. The fishing trips that lasted all afternoon when it rained. We ate collard greens, sweet potato pie, and pit-smoked pork every Sunday. On Independence Day, the whole city would be decorated, and the tugboats would parade down the river. It was in that environment that I grew up, with a respect for tradition and the discipline my father taught me. By 1972, at 15, I knew I wanted to serve. When the U.S. Navy hosted a parade in 1984, I proudly marched with the American flag through the streets of Savannah. The idea of belonging to something bigger, of defending our sea lanes, really hit me. In 1975, having just turned 18, I joined the Port Authority's engineering program. My mother cried the day I left for specialized training in Jacksonville, Florida, but my father puffed out his chest with pride. "Go, son," he told me. "Show them what a Georgia man can do," giving me a tight hug before I got on the bus. The training was tough. Man, oh man, waking up at 5 in the morning, running miles, carrying heavy gear, learning hydraulics, structural integrity, and deep water rescue code. In the first few months, I was so tired when I went to sleep, I didn't even dream. But I gradually adapted. In 1976, I returned to Savannah as a junior engineer. Assigned to the 5th Maintenance Fleet, I rode patrol on tugboats through the local waterways, fighting against cargo tampering, which was common in the area. My father passed away in 1979. I was 22 years old. A heart attack took him while he was working at the pier. It was a hard blow. My mother moved to live alone, and I, being an only child, split my time between the Port Authority and caring for her. They were difficult years, but the work gave me purpose. I was promoted to lead engineer in 1980, at 23, and started to stand out in logistics operations. The 80s brought changes for the U.S. and for me. Our work in security was also transforming. In 1983, at 26, I was promoted to maintenance chief after busting a major illegal fishing operation on the coast. I received a commendation, and my name was featured in the local paper, the Savannah Morning News. My mother cut out the article and kept it in an album of my accomplishments. It was in 1985, when I was 28, that my life changed forever. I had just received another promotion at the Port Authority after a successful operation. It was a Saturday in August. The air was thick with humidity here in Savannah. I was invited to an anniversary party at the community center, one of the most traditional gathering places in the city. I wasn't much of a party guy. I preferred spending my free time fishing in the marsh or playing pool with my colleagues from the shipyard. But that day, I decided to go. The hall was packed with a local band playing those classic Motown tunes that got couples dancing on the floor. That's when I saw her. Sarah was wearing a blue dress. She had chestnut hair down to her shoulders and a smile that lit up the whole room. She was 24 at the time. She was a recently graduated librarian at the downtown public library. I mustered up the courage and asked her to dance. I was never good at it. I stepped on her foot a few times, but she laughed so genuinely that it completely disarmed me. "You're with the Port Authority, right?" she asked as we danced. "I've seen you a few times at the wharf, always looking sharp in your uniform." I felt a little embarrassed, but I confirmed it. We talked all night. We found out we had friends in common. When I walked her home on Gaston Street, I asked for her number. She wrote the number on a napkin and handed it to me with a smile I couldn't forget for days. The following week, I gathered my courage and called. We agreed to meet at the Lighthouse Cafe, a traditional downtown meeting spot since the 70s. I ordered a black coffee, and she wanted a hot chocolate with a typical regional shortbread cookie. We talked for hours about our lives, our dreams. Sarah had been born in Atlanta, but moved to Savannah as a child when her father, an architect, was transferred. She told me about her plans to specialize in archival science and how much she loved teaching children to read. We met several times in the following months. I took her to see the view from atop the Westin Building. We had picnics at the Forsyth Park. We went to shows at the annual jazz festival. In December 1985, I officially asked Sarah to be my girlfriend over dinner at the Old Pink House restaurant and a bouquet of gardenias. I picked myself, my mother. Maria adored Sarah from the first time they met. "That girl has a future, son," she told me after Sarah left our Sunday lunch. "Don't let her get away." And I didn't. In June 1986, after a 6-month courtship, I asked Sarah to marry me. We had a simple ceremony at the Trinity Methodist Church of Savannah. with our closest family and a few colleagues from the Port Authority and the library where she taught. With my chief engineer's salary, I managed to finance a small house in the Daffin Park neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it was our home. Sarah continued working, and I stayed with the Port Authority. In the first years of marriage, our routine was calm. I left early for the shipyard. She went to the library. On my days off, we'd have a barbecue in the yard and invite the neighbors over, or we'd go fishing in the local marsh. Life was simple, but we were happier so, I believed, in 1988. At 31, I got the news that I was going to be a father. Sarah was pregnant with our first child. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. I painted the baby's room myself, set up the crib, and spent hours imagining what it would be like to hold that child. In March 1989, our son James was born. Seeing that little guy with his mother's eyes, and they said, my chin moved me in a way I can't explain. Life gained a new meaning. I started working even harder, pulling overtime whenever possible to ensure my son had everything he needed. In 1992, at 35, I was promoted to supervising engineer, which meant a raise. The same year, Sarah got pregnant again, and in April 1993, our daughter Alicia was born. Our family was complete. The 90s were years of hard work and dedication. I raised my children, teaching them values of honesty and respect, just as my father had taught me. James was more like me, quiet and observant. Alicia took after her mother, talkative and outgoing. Sarah was an excellent mother, patient and affectionate. Sometimes, when I got home late from the shipyard, I'd find her asleep in the chair with one of the kids on her lap and a storybook open on her legs. It was a scene that warmed my heart. In 1997, at 40, I lost my mother. Maria passed away after a bout of pneumonia she couldn't overcome. It was a hard blow. I had to be strong for my children and for Sarah, but inside I was shattered. My wife was my rock during that difficult time. She took care of all the funeral arrangements, hosted relatives, made food for everyone. At night, when we were finally alone, she held me and let me cry on her shoulder. "It'll pass, Greg," she whispered. "I'm here with you." The 2000s arrived, and with them came new responsibilities. In 2001, at 44, I was promoted to Division Chief Engineer at the Port Authority. The ceremony happened at the central office in Savannah, with the regional director present. Sarah and the kids were there, proud. James, at 12, was already showing interest in a marine career. He always asked me to tell him stories from my operations. Alicia, at 8, was my sweetheart, sharp as a tack, always with a book under her arm. Our house in the Daffin Park neighborhood was getting small for a family of 4. So, in 2003, at 46, I managed to finance a bigger house in the Ardsley Park neighborhood, closer to downtown. It was an older house, needing renovation, but with 3 bedrooms and a big yard where I planted palm, olive, and even a fig tree. Sarah loved having space to host her librarian friends for afternoon coffee with her sweetbreads and shortbread. Life continued its natural course. I left early for the shipyard. Sarah went to the library, where she was now the archive coordinator. James entered the Maritime Academy in Charleston, South Carolina, in 2004, at 15, fulfilling a dream of his and mine. It was tough seeing the boy leave, but we knew it was best for his future. Alicia stayed in Savannah, studying at Savannah Arts Academy, excelling in math and literature. In 2006, at 49, I completed 31 years of service in the Port Authority. I received a medal for my years of dedication and service. By then, I was responsible for coordinating engineering across the entire harbor region. It was a high-responsibility job, dealing with personnel shifts, incidents, and reports. I often arrived home exhausted but satisfied, doing what I loved. Sarah was always my safe harbor. After a tough day, she'd make shrimp and grits, my favorite dish, and sit with me on the porch to have a coffee while I vented about the day's problems. She knew every wrinkle on my face, every tired sigh, and knew exactly what to say to calm me down. At least, that's how I saw our relationship in 2007. James graduated from the Maritime Academy and passed the exam for naval officer training. Seeing my son follow a Marine career filled me with pride. I couldn't hold back the tears on his graduation day. Sarah squeezed my hand and smiled. But I noticed something different in her eyes, something I couldn't figure out at the time. Alicia graduated from high school in 2010. At 17, as the valedictorian of her class, unlike her brother, she wanted to be an architect. She took the entrance exam for Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, and was accepted #1 into the architecture program. I remember the day we took her to the bus terminal. Sarah cried the entire way home. "It's normal," I said, trying to console her. "Kids grow up and start their lives." She just nodded, staring out the car window. Our house felt silent without the children. At 53, in 2010, I started thinking about retirement. I had accrued enough service time and could retire as a chief officer if I stayed a few more years. Sarah also talked about retiring from the library. She said she was tired of the routine, the endless meetings, the difficult staff. In 2012, at 55, I was promoted to chief engineer, the last rank before the full director ranks. It was recognition for a career dedicated to public safety. We had a barbecue at home to celebrate, with grilled meat, potato salad, and the ice-cold beer we only drank on special occasions. James came from Charleston with his girlfriend, and Alicia got a pass from the university. It was one of the last times we were all together as a family. I remember that at that party, a friend from the yacht club, Arthur Sterling, showed up to congratulate me. He was a successful local businessman, owner of a chain of coastal development firms. He arrived in a gleaming black Cadillac, bringing an imported scotch as a gift. Sarah greeted him very warmly, perhaps too warmly. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought it was just her being polite. In 2015, at 58, after 40 years of service, I retired from the Port Authority as a chief engineer. The retirement ceremony was moving, with a speech from the commander and a 21-gun salute. Sarah was by my side, elegant in a red dress. Our children couldn't attend. James was on a deployment in the Pacific, and Alicia was in the middle of a major project rotation at her firm. The first few months of retirement were strange. After decades of waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, putting on my uniform, and heading to the shipyard, I suddenly found myself without a routine. I started taking better care of the vegetable garden in the backyard, fishing more often, meeting old friends at the Lighthouse Cafe to chat. Sarah continued working at the library. She would retire the following year, in 2016. At 59, I received an invitation to work part-time in the administrative section of the shipyard. It was a quiet job, from 2 to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, organizing documents, helping with the training of new recruits, and sharing my experience. I accepted immediately. I felt useful again, even though I no longer wore the uniform. Sarah retired at the end of 2016. At 55, I thought we would finally have more time together. That we would take that trip to the Caribbean we always postponed. That we would visit our children more often. But life had its own plans, different from ours. In 2017, I noticed Sarah was different, more distant, always on her cell phone, going out frequently to meet her friends. She started dressing up more, bought new clothes, changed her haircut. It's just a phase, I thought. After all that time dedicated to the archives, she deserves to take care of herself. But there was something in her eyes, a different sparkle when she received certain messages that should have alerted me. It was mid-2018. I was 61 when I started noticing the first truly strange signs. Sarah was more absent, even when she was home. She spent hours on her cell phone, always smiling at the screen, and when I got close, she'd quickly lock the device. "It's just a group chat with my old librarian colleagues," she'd say. But something in the tone of her voice didn't convince me at that time. My routine was simple. I woke up early out of habit, made a strong black coffee, tended to the plants in the yard, and then headed to the shipyard at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd return at 6 o'clock, have dinner with Sarah, we'd watch the news, and go to bed. On weekends, we sometimes went to the community center. Other times, we had old friends over. One day in September 2018, I arrived home early from the shipyard. I had a backache that made it impossible to concentrate on work. When I walked in, I caught a strong scent of men's cologne on the living room sofa. It certainly wasn't mine. It was an expensive, imported scent. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, visibly surprised to see me. "Greg, what happened? Why are you home so early?" she asked nervously, adjusting her hair. "Backache," I replied, looking around. "We had a visitor." "Oh, yes. Rhonda stopped by to drop off some files for me," she replied a little too quickly. Rhonda was an old library colleague. I accepted the explanation, but the scent kept bothering me. It wasn't women's perfume. Days later, coming home from work, I noticed 2 bourbon glasses in the kitchen sink. Sarah knew I didn't drink because of the high blood pressure medication I had been taking since I was 58. "Who was here?" I asked, pointing to the glasses. "Martha came to visit me," she said, referring to another former colleague. "We had some bourbon while talking about old times." I started to get suspicious, but I scolded myself mentally. "You're getting paranoid, Greg," I told myself. "Sarah is your partner of over 30 years, the mother of your children." But the coincidences kept stacking up. In December 2018, near Christmas, Sarah started receiving many calls. She'd go to the bedroom or the backyard to answer them. She spoke softly. Sometimes she laughed in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. When I asked who it was, she always dodged the question. Was it Alicia? Or just the people from the book club? Our daughter Alicia, now 25, was coming home for Christmas. James, at 29, was on a deployment overseas and couldn't make it. I thought my daughter's presence would ease the strangeness that had settled between Sarah and me, but she remained distant, as if she were physically present but her mind was wandering elsewhere. On December 23rd, Sarah said she needed to buy the last Christmas gifts. She left, dressed up a little too nicely for someone just going to the mall. She returned hours later without any shopping bags. When I questioned her, she said she hadn't found anything worthwhile. That night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. With 1,000 thoughts running through my head, January 2019 arrived, and with it another strange behavior. Sarah started washing our bedsheets every Tuesday and Thursday, religiously. She was always organized, but this was excessive. "The Savannah heat makes me sweat a lot at night," she justified. But even on cooler days, the routine of changing the sheets continued. In February 2019, I went to buy shrimp at old Mr. Paul's fish market. As I did every morning, Mrs. Nettie, the nosy neighbor on the corner, stopped me on the sidewalk. "Chief Greg, what a nice car stops at your house when you're not around." "A silver Lexus, right. Must be important people," she commented with a malicious smile. I felt a chill in my stomach. Silver Lexus, the image of Arthur Sterling immediately came to mind. He was the only person I knew in Savannah who had a car like that. But why would he be going to my house in my absence? "That must be a mistake, Mrs. Nettie. I don't know anyone with a car like that," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "Oh, but I'm not wrong. Every Tuesday and Thursday, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he parks right there. He leaves alone around 5 o'clock, she insisted. I went home, stunned. Tuesday and Thursday. Exactly the days Sarah washed the sheets. Exactly during the hours I was at the shipyard, but I still refused to believe what seemed obvious. I needed concrete proof before confronting her. As a man who spent his whole life investigating security breaches, I refused to investigate my own home. The love and respect I had for Sarah prevented me from doing something I considered undignified, like following her or checking her cell phone. In the following weeks, I started observing Sarah more closely. I noticed she dressed up, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She wore that red dress I gave her for our wedding anniversary. She put on a stronger perfume. She applied her makeup carefully. "I'm going to the club to meet the girls for tea," was the justification. in March 2019. Sarah started complaining that I came home tired from work, that we didn't go out together anymore like before. All you want to know about is the shipyard and fishing with your buddies, she'd say. But when I suggested the movies or dinner out, she always had an excuse. I have a headache today. Oh, I promised Laura I'd go to her place. I remember one specific night in April 2019. I came back from the shipyard, and Sarah was lying down, saying she was extremely tired. I spent the day cleaning the house, she justified, but the house didn't look particularly clean, and her perfume was stronger than normal. When I went to kiss her, she turned her face, offering only her cheek. That hurt. The suspicions were piling up, but I still didn't want to believe. In May 2019, at 62, I had a knee problem while fishing. The doctor recommended 2 weeks of rest. I informed the shipyard that I would take that period of medical leave. I didn't tell Sarah right away, thinking of surprising her. Maybe preparing a special meal for her, trying to rekindle the flame of our relationship. The first Tuesday of my leave, May 7th, 2019, Sarah dressed up as usual and said she was going to the club. As soon as she left, I stayed at the window and saw something that froze me. A silver Lexus pulled up on the corner. She quickly got in, and the car drove off. My world collapsed. All the suspicions I tried to deny were confirmed in that moment. But I still needed absolute certainty. As a Port Authority officer, I learned never to jump to conclusions. I decided I needed irrefutable evidence before confronting her. May 7th, 2019, was when my life began to fall apart. After seeing Sarah get into the silver Lexus, I spent the day in a daze, trying to find alternative explanations for what I had witnessed. Maybe it was just a ride from a friend with a new car. Maybe it was an executive taxi she had called. But deep down, I knew. When she returned around 5:30 in the afternoon, her face was flushed, and the smile disappeared when she saw me sitting in the living room. "Greg, I thought you were at the shipyard," she exclaimed, visibly nervous. "I'm on medical leave." "Knee problem," I replied, watching her every reaction. "Oh my God. Why didn't you tell me? I would have stayed home to take care of you," she said, approaching to kiss me on the cheek. The men's cologne was ingrained in her clothes. "I didn't want to bother you." "And apparently, you were busy," I commented. Unable to completely hide the bitterness in my voice, Sarah pretended not to notice my tone and quickly changed the subject. Talking about her friends at the club, the tea they had, the gossip they had shared. While she spoke, I watched her gestures, her uneasiness, the way she avoided looking me in the eye. That night, Sarah went straight to the shower. When I announced I was going to sleep, she stayed under the water for almost an hour, as if trying to wash away any trace of what she had done. When she finally came to bed, she lay as far away from me as possible, claiming she was hot. During the following days, I kept my medical leave routine without showing any signs of suspicion. Sarah continued with her outings, although she was more careful now. She no longer dressed up as much at home. She probably carried the clothes in her bag and changed elsewhere. Calls were answered only when she was alone in the bedroom or the bathroom. It was Sunday, May 12th, 2019, Mother's Day, when I made a decision. We were having lunch together. An awkward silence hovered between us, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Alicia had called earlier to wish Sarah a happy Mother's Day, and James had sent a message since he was in an area with poor communication. Suddenly, her cell phone rang. She looked at the screen, turned pale, and said she needed to take it on the porch. When she returned, her face was tight. "Who was that?" I asked casually, serving myself more rice. "Oh, it was Carmen from the club, just wishing me a happy Mother's Day," she replied. Without meeting my gaze, at that moment, I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. On Monday, May 13th. As soon as Sarah left to run errands, I opened the computer browser and searched for security cameras. I found an online store that sold micro cameras the size of a button, easy to hide, and that transmitted images directly to my cell phone. It went against everything I believed in invading the privacy of my own home, but I felt I had no choice. I bought 4 cameras with urgent delivery. They arrived on Wednesday, May 15th, when Sarah had gone to the hair salon. I installed one in the living room, strategically positioned on the shelf between the picture frames. Another in the kitchen, disguised among the wall decorations. The third in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. And the last, very reluctantly, in our own bedroom, hidden on the bookshelf. The cameras were discreet, practically invisible if you didn't know where to look. I downloaded the app to my cell phone and tested the transmission. It worked perfectly. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Thursday, May 16th, 2019. I woke up with my stomach churning. Sarah got ready as usual. She said she was going shopping and would stop by the club afterward. She kissed me quickly on the forehead and left. As soon as I heard the gate close, I opened the app on my cell phone. For almost an hour, nothing happened. The house was empty and silent. At 2:15 in the afternoon, I heard the sound of the front gate opening. My heart raced when I saw the front door open through the living room camera. Sarah walked in, but she wasn't alone. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a well-cut suit followed her. It was Arthur Sterling. I felt a pang in my chest when he grabbed her waist as soon as the door closed, kissing her with an intimacy that wounded me like a knife. "I missed you," he said, taking off his blazer. "Me too," Sarah replied, in a voice I barely recognized, sweet and youthful. "But we have to be quick today. Greg is on leave. He might decide to come back early." "Is he still in that ridiculous job at the shipyard?" Arthur asked disdainfully. "A retired chief engineer doing desk work. Pathetic." Sarah laughed, a laugh she had never directed at me. "He likes to feel useful, and the extra pay helps." They went to the kitchen, where Arthur took a bottle of expensive champagne out of his briefcase. "I brought that French one you love. It costs a fortune, but you deserve it." He expertly opened the bottle, poured 2 glasses, and they toasted. "To us," he said, "and to the future we'll have together." I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, even though every word felt like a punch to the gut. They talked for a few minutes, drinking the champagne that, as Arthur made a point of mentioning, costs more than my weekly pension. "How's your husband, the little chief engineer?" he asked, with a mocking smile. "Don't even talk to me," Sarah replied, rolling her eyes. "He gets more boring and predictable every day. Always the same stories from his Port Authority days. Always the same routines. Breakfast at 7 o'clock. Lunch at 12 o'clock. Dinner at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's like living with an old clock." "Why are you still with him?" Arthur asked, caressing her arm. Sarah shrugged. "Comfort, I guess. And the Port Authority medical insurance is excellent. With my blood pressure issues, I can't be without it." Those words hit me like a shotgun blast. 40 years of marriage reduced to comfort and medical insurance. For decades, sharing life, raising children, building a home, and in the end, I was nothing more than a convenience. They moved down the hallway toward the bedroom. My hand trembled as I followed the images on my cell phone. Arthur hugged her from behind, kissing her neck. 40 years, putting up with a little chief engineer, he murmured. "You deserve better, my love." "And what would be better?" Sarah asked, turning to face him. "Me, of course," Arthur replied arrogantly. "When he dies, I'll marry you. Then you'll have everything you deserve. My house on the coast, international trips, jewelry, designer clothes, everything that failed engineer could never give you." Sarah smiled. A smile that mixed melancholy and ambition. "Sometimes I think I wasted my life, Arthur. You chose poorly, my love, but there's still time to fix it," he said, leading her into the bedroom. What followed was the final humiliation. In the same bed where we slept for decades, where we conceived our children, where we shared dreams and nightmares, Sarah and Arthur made love. I couldn't watch for more than a few seconds before turning off the app. Feeling physically and emotionally nauseous, I spent the next few hours wandering the city, driving aimlessly, occasionally stopping to throw up by the side of the road. The pain was indescribable. A mix of rage, disappointment, shame, and a deep, deep sense of helplessness. When I finally managed to calm down, I parked near the overlook on the Weston building and watched the city in the distance. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and red. I thought about everything I had built in that city, all the good and bad memories. I thought about my children, who were too far away to witness the collapse of their parents' marriage. At 5:20 in the afternoon, I checked my phone again. Through the app, I saw Arthur saying goodbye to Sarah at the door. They were immaculate again, as if nothing had happened. He kissed her and left. Sarah immediately started tidying the house, changing the sheets, washing the glasses, opening the windows to clear the smell of cologne and sex. At 5:40, she picked up the phone and called me. I let it ring without answering. She tried 2 more times, probably worried about my prolonged absence. On the 3rd try, I answered. "Hello, my love," she said in a sweet, worried voice. "Where are you? It's almost dinner time." "I'm sorting some things out," I replied dryly. "Don't wait up for me. I'll be late. Is everything okay?" "You sound strange," she asked with a concern that I now knew was fake. "Everything's fine. I just need some time alone," I replied, and hung up before she could say anything else. I stayed at the overlook until the sky was completely dark, the city lights shining down below like fallen stars. What was I going to do now? How would I face Sarah, knowing what I knew? How could I look into the eyes of the woman who had shattered my heart into pieces after 4 decades together? The answer came clear as the starry sky that night. I would confront the truth, no matter how painful. I deserved that after a lifetime of honesty and dedication. I returned home shortly after 9 o'clock, that fateful May 16th, 2019. The sky was completely dark, sprinkled with stars that seemed indifferent to my pain. I parked the car in the garage and stayed there for a few minutes, trying to gather the strength to go inside. 40 years of marriage were about to fall apart in a single conversation. When I finally entered, Sarah was pacing in the living room. Her face showed worry, but I knew now it was just another one of her acts. She rushed toward me as soon as she saw me. "Greg, where were you?" "I was worried," she exclaimed, trying to hug me. I pulled away from the embrace, something I had never done in all our years together. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, even to myself. "Of course, my love." "What's wrong?" she asked, indicating the sofa, the same sofa where Arthur Sterling had placed his expensive blazer hours earlier. "No, not here," I replied. "Let's go to the kitchen." In the kitchen, I sat at the table and placed my cell phone face down in front of me. Sarah sat on the other side, visibly uneasy. The silence stretched for a few painful seconds before I could speak. "Sarah, how long has it been?" I finally asked, looking her directly in the eye. "You and Arthur Sterling. How long has it been?" Her face instantly turned pale. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment it seemed she was going to deny it, but something in my look must have shown her it would be useless. How? How did you know?" She finally stammered, her voice almost a whisper. "Does it matter? Answer my question. How long have you been cheating on me with him?" Sarah lowered her eyes, her fingers nervously playing with her wedding band, the same band I had placed on her finger in 1986, when I promised to love and respect her for life. A promise she clearly didn't take seriously. 2 years, she confessed quietly. "It started in 2017, after I retired. 2 years. 730 days of lies, betrayal, deceit, while I worked, took care of the house, and thought about our future together. She was in the arms of another man. Why?" I asked, the word coming out as if ripped from my throat. Sarah finally looked up, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never noticed before, a mix of resentment and regret, not for what she did, but for being caught. "Do you really want to know, Greg?" she asked, her voice gaining a bitter tone. "Do you really want me to tell you? I want the truth. After 40 years, it's the least I deserve." She took a deep breath. as if preparing to finally remove a mask she had worn for a long time. Because I felt invisible, Greg. Because for years, all you ever talk about is the Port Authority, your achievements, your stories that I've heard 1,000 times. Because you never ask what I want, what I feel, what I dream. I was stunned by those words. What did she mean? I never asked what she wanted. Our entire marriage had been built around the family's needs, including hers. I always worked hard to give you and our children everything I could, I argued, feeling indignation rise inside me. Everything you could, she emphasized, a dry laugh escaping her lips. And what you could was so little, Greg. A simple house in Savannah, vacations at the coast. A sedan you replace every 10 years. And that wasn't enough. I wanted to live, see places, experience new things, feel desired, admired. And Arthur gives you all that, I concluded, the bitter taste of bile rising in my throat. Yes, she admitted bluntly. Arthur makes me feel alive. He takes me to Charleston for fancy restaurants. He gives me jewelry, designer clothes. He treats me like a queen, not just a housewife. Every word was like a knife stab. 40 years, reduced to material possessions, to status. The love, I thought, we shared was nothing but an illusion. And are our children also part of that dissatisfaction of yours? I asked, knowing it was a low blow, but unable to stop myself. For an instant, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. Our children are the only good thing we did together, Greg, she said softly. I love them more than anything, but not enough to respect their father. Sarah didn't respond. The silence weighed between us like a physical, almost suffocating presence. Then I picked up my cell phone and slid it across the table. What is this? She asked, confused. See for yourself, I replied, opening the camera app and showing her the recordings from that day. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw the images of herself with Arthur in our house. Her face went from pale to deep red. You spied on me? She asked, indignant. You put cameras in our house. Our house. I emphasized. The house I built with my hard-earned little chief engineer's salary, as your lover likes to call me. Sarah fell silent. She couldn't deny it, with the evidence right before her eyes. What do you want me to say, Greg? She finally asked, her voice defeated. The truth, Sarah. For once in your life, tell me the truth. Did you ever love me? The question hung in the air for a moment that felt like an eternity. Sarah looked at her hands, then at the kitchen walls, where we had shared so many meals, conversations, and laughs. I did love you, yes, she replied quietly. In the beginning, when we were young and full of dreams, I admired your dedication, your sense of duty, your honesty. But over time, I don't know, Greg. Life became monotonous, predictable. While my friends were traveling, buying beach houses, changing cars every year, we continued in the same routine. So it was about money, I concluded, feeling a knot in my throat. 40 years of marriage thrown away for money. It's not just money, she tried to argue. It's the attention, the affection, the desire, ... Spare me the details. I cut in, unable to hear any more. All I know is that while I was dedicating my life to protecting people, to serving my country with honor, my own wife was betraying me with a man who doesn't have half my character. Just because he has money. Sarah abruptly stood up, tears finally streaming from her eyes. It's not fair to simplify it like that, Greg. Our marriage has been dead for years. Our marriage was alive to me. I shouted, hitting the table so hard it shook. It was the first time in 40 years I had raised my voice against her. I still loved you, Sarah. I was still planning our future together. I still dreamed of meeting our grandchildren, traveling with you when I finally retired completely. Tears ran freely down my face now. All the pain and disappointment of hours of discovery were finally finding their way out. Sarah was crying, too, but her sobs no longer moved me. Forgive me, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. You never meant to hurt me. I repeated in disbelief. You brought your lover into our house, into our bed. You laughed at me, mocked my profession, my salary, my dedication. And you never meant to hurt me? Sarah slumped back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the confident woman I had seen in the recordings hours earlier. "What are we going to do now?" she asked between sobs. I looked at the woman with whom I had shared almost my entire adult life. The mother of my children, the person I thought would be my partner until the end. And I felt an immense emptiness, as if everything we built together had never truly existed. "There is no us anymore." "Sarah," I replied with a calm that surprised me, "you chose your path when you decided to betray not only your husband, but also your vows, your family, your principles." "Greg, please," she begged, reaching her hand across the table to try and reach mine. "We can try again. We can go to couples therapy. We can." I pulled my hand away before she could touch it. "No, Sarah. Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired. Trust is one of them. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," I announced. "Tomorrow we start discussing the terms of separation." "Separation," she repeated, as if the word were in a foreign language she didn't understand. "Yes, Sarah, separation, divorce, the end of a 40-year marriage that apparently only meant something to me." I left the kitchen without looking back, feeling her eyes follow me. In the hallway, I stopped in front of the wall of photos documenting our life together, the wedding, the births of our children, graduations, birthdays, Christmases, an entire life captured in images that now seemed to belong to strangers. In the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into space. Outside, the Savannah night continued, as always, indifferent to the fact that my world had just collapsed. The same cool May winds blew through the window cracks. The same starry sky shone out there. The same quiet streets I had known since childhood. I thought about my children, how I would tell them. James, so much like me, serious and reserved. Alicia, intelligent and sensitive. How would they react to learning that their parents, after so many years together, were separating? How would I explain that the family we built with so much effort had been destroyed by greed and vanity? I didn't sleep that night. One stayed up, reviewing every moment of the last few years. Looking for signs I should have noticed, words I should have said, actions that might have changed the course of events. But deep down, I knew there was nothing I could have done. Sarah had made her choice, not out of impulse or momentary passion, but deliberately, day after day, for 2 long years. The next morning, May 17th, 2019, I woke up you can call it waking up when you haven't slept, feeling like a stranger in my own skin, as if the Greg from yesterday had died during the night, and a new man, older, wearier, more skeptical, had taken his place. I left the room early, before Sarah woke up. I made a strong coffee. I sat on the porch and watched the sun rise over Savannah. The birds were singing. The neighbors were starting their routines. The mailman was passing by, making his morning delivery. The world kept spinning, indifferent to my pain. When Sarah finally appeared, she was distraught, with deep bags under her eyes and a face swollen from crying. She silently poured coffee and sat on the other side of the table. "I didn't sleep all night," she commented, as if that might elicit some sympathy from me. "Me neither," I replied dryly. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the sound of the cups against the saucers being the only thing breaking the morning stillness. "Greg," she began hesitantly, "about yesterday, ... "I don't want to talk about yesterday," I cut in. "What's done is done. Now we need to decide how we'll move forward from here." Sarah nodded slowly, accepting my decision. "What do you have in mind?" "I'm moving out of the house," I announced. "I'm going to look for an apartment to rent today. This house has too many memories, both good and bad. I can't keep living here." "You don't need to leave," she protested weakly. "I can go to my sister's in Atlanta until ... "Until what, Sarah?" "Until Arthur invites you to live with him. Until you two decide if you're going to be together now that you don't need to hide anymore." She lowered her head. "It's not like that. I don't care how it is, I replied. You and Arthur can do whatever you want now. I just want distance. And our children? She asked, her voice breaking. What are we going to tell them? The same question that had tormented me all night. The truth, I replied simply. That, after 40 years, we decided to go our separate ways. Are you going to tell them about Arthur? I looked at her for a long time before answering. I'm not the one who should tell them that, Sarah. It's your choice. But they are adults. They'll figure it out sooner or later. Sarah started crying again, silent sobs that shook her shoulders. For a moment, I felt the impulse to console her, as I had done so many times throughout our marriage. But that impulse was soon replaced by the memory of the images I had seen, of the cruel words I had heard. I'm going to call a real estate agent, I said, getting up. And a lawyer, too. The sooner we settle this, the better. Do you really not want to try again? She asked, in one last desperate plea for everything we lived through together. I stopped at the porch door and looked at her. The morning sun illuminated her face, highlighting every line that time had drawn. She was still a beautiful woman, even at 58, a woman I loved deeply, for whom I would have given my life without hesitation. You were the one who gave up first, Sarah, I replied with sadness. When you brought another man into our house, into our bed, when you laughed at me behind my back, when you decided that 40 years of life together were worth less than some expensive gifts and fancy dinners, I walked out the door without waiting for her reply. There was nothing more to say. The marriage, which began in 1986, full of dreams and promises, had ended on a cool May morning in 2019, leaving only the bitter taste of betrayal and the certainty that nothing I believed was real. That same afternoon, one rented a small apartment downtown near the shipyard. I didn't need much space. It was just me now. I only took the essentials, some clothes, documents, photos of the children. I left behind the furniture, the appliances, everything we had bought together over the years, material objects that, as I discovered in the most painful way, meant nothing without the love and trust that should accompany them. When I left the house with the few bags I had packed, Sarah was at the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Forgive me, Greg, she pleaded one last time. I never wanted it to end like this. I looked at her for the last time as her husband. You chose to be poor, Sarah, I replied, deliberately using the formal address instead of the familiar one I always used with her. Poor in character, poor in principle, poor in loyalty. I may not have money, but I have something that neither you nor Arthur will ever have. Dignity, with those words. I got into the car and drove away, leaving behind not only the house where I had lived for so many years, but also the life I thought I had, the dreams I nurtured, and the trust I placed in someone who didn't deserve it. Chief Engineer Gregory Thomas, who for 40 years defended his country and family with honor and dedication, discovered in the cruelest way that the true enemy had been sleeping beside him all along. 6 years have passed since that May of 2019. Today, at 68, I look out the window of my small downtown Savannah apartment and see the city I've known all my life through different eyes. I still work part-time at the shipyard, though I could have stopped long ago. The job keeps me sane, gives me purpose, and fills the hours that would otherwise be consumed by painful memories. The divorce was finalized in October 2019. After 5 months of tense negotiations and endless paperwork, Sarah kept the house and half of our savings. I didn't fight for more. Money was never important to me, and that house held memories I preferred to forget. News of our separation spread quickly through Savannah. In a small city like ours, secrets don't have long legs. Telling our children was the hardest part. In June 2019, a month after the separation, James took leave and came to Savannah. He was 30 at the time. He was already a captain in the Navy, with the same disciplined posture he inherited from me. I told him about the separation without going into detail about the betrayal, but James was always perceptive. "She's the one who cheated on you, right, Dad?" he asked directly, while we had coffee on the balcony of my new apartment. I couldn't lie to my son. I confirmed it with a nod, unable to put the humiliation I had felt into words. James was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I suspected it," he finally said. "The last few times I came home, I noticed how different she was. Always on her cell phone. Always with excuses to go out." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to influence her relationship with her mother. Despite everything, Sarah was still the mother of my children. "What are you going to do now, Dad?" "Keep going," I replied simply. "What else can I do?" Alicia received the news by phone. She was in the middle of her architecture residency in Atlanta and couldn't leave. She cried a lot. She said she would come as soon as possible. When she finally got a break in July 2019, she came straight to my apartment. "Why, Dad?" she asked through tears as she hugged me. "You seemed so happy together." "Sometimes appearances are deceiving, sweetheart," I replied, feeling my own eyes fill with tears. "Sometimes we build an entire life on illusions." Alicia spent a few days with me, then went to visit her mother. When she returned, she was serious, thoughtful. She told me everything, she said, sitting beside me on the small apartment sofa. About Arthur, about the 2 years of betrayal. I was surprised that Sarah had been so honest. Maybe it was a sign of repentance, or maybe she just wanted to gain her daughter's sympathy before I told my version. "She's living with him now," Alicia continued, "in his house, in the Isle of Hope neighborhood." The news shouldn't have surprised me, but I still felt a pang in my chest. So fast. We had barely separated, and Sarah had already gone to the arms of her lover, now officially her partner. "I hope she's happy," I said, and to my surprise, I realized it was true. There was no more rage, just a resigned sadness for the end of something I believed was special. Life continued its course. In December 2019, I spent my first Christmas alone in over 4 decades. James was on a deployment overseas, and Alicia was assigned to a major project deadline at her firm. I heard through acquaintances that Sarah had traveled with Arthur to Europaris, Rome, Barcelona, the places she had always dreamed of seeing, and that I, with my modest engineer's salary, could never provide for her in 2020. When the pandemic hit the world, I worried about my children. James was in a high-risk area, and Alicia was on the front lines, helping design temporary field hospitals. I spent hours on the phone with them, offering the support I could from a distance. I heard that Sarah and Arthur had been trapped in Italy for a few weeks due to border closures, but eventually managed to return to the US during that period of isolation. I started reflecting more deeply on my life, on the choices I made. I don't regret being a chief engineer, dedicating my life to the safety of my harbor. But perhaps I neglected important aspects of my marriage. Maybe I took Sarah for granted, assuming she shared the same values as me. In 2021. At 64, I had a heart problem, nothing serious, but enough to make me face my own mortality. I was hospitalized for a week at St. Joseph's Hospital in Savannah. James got leave to visit me, and Alicia, now a qualified architect, consulted the best structural engineers about my case. It was during that hospitalization that Sarah came to see me. She was thinner, with shorter hair, dressed in elegant clothes that Arthur had certainly bought. She seemed nervous entering the hospital room. "Greg," she said hesitantly, stopping beside my bed. "How are you?" "I've been better," I replied with a half-smile, "but the doctors say I'll make a full recovery." She nodded, her eyes scanning the equipment I was connected to, the white walls of the room anything but my face. "I heard from James," she explained. "I thought I should come see you." "Thank you for coming," I said sincerely. There was no resentment left, only the realization that we were now in different chapters of our lives. Sarah sat in the chair next to the bed, nervously adjusting her designer handbag in her lap. "And how have you been, aside from this?" "Fine," I replied. "I'm still at the shipyard part-time. I fish on weekends. I visit the kids when I can. It's a simple life, but it satisfies me." She smiled sadly. "You were always like that, weren't you?" Always content with little. It's not about being content with little, Sarah, I replied, feeling the need to clarify something she may never have understood. It's about valuing what truly matters: honor, dignity, character. Sarah lowered her eyes, and I saw that my words had hit a nerve. I made a mistake, Greg. A terrible mistake. Let's leave the past in the past, I suggested, not wanting to reopen that pain. What's done is done. She looked at me with teary eyes. You were always too good a man for me. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Sarah stayed a few more minutes, asking about my treatment and commenting on the children. When she said goodbye, she hesitated for a moment, as if wanting to say something more, but ended up just lightly squeezing my hand before leaving. I found out a few months later that she and Arthur had broken up. Apparently, the great businessman had found a younger woman, a model from Miami. Sarah returned to the house that had been ours, now alone. She tried to reconnect with old friends and resume her life in Savannah. But a small city has a long memory. Many doors were closed to her. In 2022, James married Laura, a lieutenant he met during training. The ceremony was at the military club in Charleston, elegant and formal. Sarah and I attended, of course, but we stayed on opposite sides of the room. Our children tried hard to navigate between two parents who barely spoke in 2023. Alicia gave us our first grandchild, Sophia. I held that tiny creature in my arms and felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in a long time. Life continued through new generations, new beginnings. It was that same year that I received an unexpected call from Sarah. Her voice sounded different, more fragile. Greg, I just got the diagnosis, she said without preamble. Breast cancer. Early stage, but I'll need surgery and treatment. I was silent for a moment, absorbing the news. Despite everything that had happened between us, I still cared about her, the mother of my children, the woman with whom I had shared so many years of my life. Do you need anything? I finally asked. I can go with you to the appointments if you want. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she hadn't expected the offer. Thank you, she replied, her voice breaking. That would mean a lot to me. In the following weeks, I took Sarah to appointments in Charleston. I waited during her surgery. I helped with the medical insurance paperwork, ironically, the same Port Authority medical insurance she had mentioned as one of the reasons for staying married to me. It wasn't out of revenge or to rub it in, but because it was the right thing to do. Because, despite everything, 40 years of history aren't completely erased. James and Alicia were surprised by my decision to help Sarah, but they supported me. You're a better man than I would be, Dad, James commented when he came to Savannah during his mother's recovery. Sarah recovered well from the surgery and treatment. Our relationship obviously never returned to what it was, but we found a civil way to coexist, mainly for the sake of the children and our granddaughter. In 2024, at 67, I was honored by the Port Authority for 50 years of service to public safety, counting from my enrollment in 1975 to the administrative work I still do. It was a simple but meaningful ceremony. James came in uniform, proud, and Alicia brought little Sophia, who ran around the station, delighted with the uniforms and patrol cars. To my surprise, Sarah also attended, discreetly sitting at the back. Congratulations, Greg, she told me afterward, when everyone was leaving. You deserve every medal and every recognition. You were always an honorable man. I thanked her with a nod, not knowing what else to say. There was genuine regret in her eyes, a sadness for what might have been and wasn't. And now, in 2025, at 68, I reflect on everything that has happened, on the lessons I learned, on the meaning of a life lived. I lost a 4-decade marriage to betrayal and greed, but I did not lose my dignity, my character, or my principles. Those no one can take from me. Life taught me that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. That trusting is a risk we need to take, but we must be prepared for the consequences. That money and status, so important to some, do not buy true character or happiness. Sarah ended up discovering this the hard way. Abandoned by Arthur, when he found a younger, shinier version, she found herself alone, having lost not only the material comfort she valued so much, but also the respect of the community and, most importantly, the love and trust of a man who would have given his life for her. I don't take pleasure in her misfortune, only a resigned sadness for the waste of something that could have been beautiful until the end. My days are quiet now. I wake up early out of habit. I drink my coffee on the small apartment balcony. I go to the shipyard at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and return at 6 o'clock on weekends. I fish at the lake with old friends. I visit my granddaughter when Alicia comes to Savannah. I talk to James by video call. It's a simple life, but it's an honorable one, a life that, despite the scars, makes me proud. If this story warmed your heart a little, like it warmed mine, please leave a like to brighten this 68-year-old's day. Subscribe to the channel now, dear friend, so you don't miss the next stories I'll tell with all my love. And tell me one little thing in the comments. Where are you watching this video from, and what time is it for you right now? Have you ever faced a betrayal like this in your life? How did you manage to move forward? This old man is very happy to know who is on the other side listening to me. And at what moment of your day you took a little time to listen to me. A big hug the size of my heart